Hello, everyone, to another episode of Mashable Pakistan Lab. Today, we have with us the author of Skyfall. And if you have not been living in a cave, आपने social media पे इस book के intros या इसकी hype जो है वो देखी होगी. नहीं देखी हुई तो stick around and we'll be talking to Sabah about the book, about her journey of how this came about. Hello and welcome, Sabah.
Thank you so much, Fatma. Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So before we just dig in Skyfall, and because I'm also just in the middle of reading it and not to give anything away, but let's discuss the other amazing things that you do. You are a teacher, you are an Oxford alumni, you have had some experience in the corporate sector in Karachi as well. You're a filmmaker, so and now you're an author. So what's going on?
I know that's such an interesting way to put it. And yeah, I mean, I started out my journey with Citibank, which I think wasn't really planned because I was quite anti-corporate. Fresh out of college, it was the sense of, oh, we're definitely, you're in this very idealistic world. I have to say, though, I spent time at Citi across two stints and loved it. I really sucked my teeth into it. I really enjoyed it, and I think it debunked some of those, ideas that we have about the corporate world. But then, we've moved geographies. So I've spent a lot of time in Pakistan. I've spent some time for my postgrad in England. I've spent time in Qatar, and now we're in the UAE. And so when I got here, I was looking around for jobs, and NYU kind of happened. And I think all of that to say that I think NYU really became for me a kind of springboard into experimenting with a lot of this creative stuff that was somewhere, I think, latent in my mind, but it just helped to bring it to the fore. And I guess I should say, Fatma, that I embrace all kinds of labels. I'm not really a label person, but whatever, whether that is filmmaker or educator or author or mother, whatever that might be. But I think the one that I identify with the most is storyteller. And it's taken me a while to come to that, but what I realize is that quite nicely encapsulates a lot of what you've mentioned right now. And so yeah, I think my time at Oxford, as you were referencing, also really catalyzed that in my mind to say, all right, I think I'm interested in all kinds of storytelling, agnostic to platform and medium. And so I'm doing part of that as research at NYU. I'm doing it as part of documentary filmmaking. I've got a series coming out later this year on Me Too in South Asia, which is based on interviews with college students who are survivors of sexual harassment. So that kind of stuff, and I think it all kind of nicely ties in together. But that is, I think probably how all these different things come together in my life right now.
So your research focus basically in some of the stuff that you've already mentioned sort of revolves around the various social dynamics of a society. So before we go into how you ended up in fiction, the research work that you have done and the films that you have worked on and the ones you're working on right now as well, they also are a bit on hardcore issues. So just talk about that usually people don't associate storytelling, I in my personal opinion wrongly so, but to the fact that you are talking about storytelling and you're talking about hardcore issues.
Right.
Storytelling is usually associated with the hunky dory fairy tale stories. Those are stories, and everything else is very serious and very rigid. And you can't do storytelling to
Yeah.
explore those ideas. What's your take on it, and what has been your experience on that front?
Yeah, I mean, Fatma, the truth is that I think a lot of the different parts of my experience kind of have amalgamated to pique an interest in social dynamics. And I think, like, again, like, it goes back to the fact that I've studied social anthropology, and obviously, so I have this interest in people and societies, and kind of it's funny, but like casually we say, like, anthropologists are just people watchers, and so, like, you'll be sitting on a tube or you'll be sitting on a bus somewhere and, like, just making these little mental notes and observations. And so I think what really lies at the heart of any kind of work that I'm doing right now, including a lot of the research stuff that you mentioned earlier, has to do with social dynamics and specifically with this idea of revolutions and social movements. So what I mean with that is that, we typically think of a revolution and we think of bloodshed and, kind of guns and bombs and steel. And I think I struggle with that a little bit, just in that, of course, that's central to a lot of movements and a lot of revolutions. But what my work, whether that's in filmmaking now or whether that's with research work that I'm doing with colleagues at NYU, it's allowing me to unpack this idea that revolutions can be silent, revolutions can be quietly fierce, and yet really compelling and really powerful. And so, I'll give you a couple of quick examples just to make it a little more tangible. I'm doing this the Me Too series that I've just spoken to you about, and there are young girls from Nepal and Pakistan and India who've said, this is the first time we're speaking about this kind of sexual violence, and this is a story we've not even said to our mothers. Now, to me, that's not less than a revolution. That is the first step to interrupting sexual violence. And, doing it in a language that is local. What I've struggled with a lot as far as Me Too goes is that, I struggle with picking up something that kind of garnered traction in the West and then just applying it to places like Pakistan. I want the woman who works in my mother's home to be able to have the tools to talk about Me Too eventually. So I think talking to these young women from different parts of South Asia, that's the kind of social dynamic I'm interested in. Another project I'm looking at right now is with an ex-colleague of mine, Danielle Carell, who's now at Yale, and we're looking at interview-based research with young Afghani men. And it kind of looks at how religious propaganda, jihadist propaganda, how that impacts the tolerance for violence amongst these young men. So again, this idea that change is sparking, a movement is taking place, but it doesn't always have to be in your face. I'm looking at how rap and hip hop is changing the landscape in Lyari. So I think that's really what lies at the heart of what interests me. Your point about fairy tales, I'm so glad you brought that up, because yes, for a long time, I think that's the kind of material I consumed and I was exposed to. And I can't sit here pretending that it was all very, kind of intellectually enriching. But I think I've reacted to that now at this stage in life, and over the last several years, over my time I think LUMS, when I did my undergrad there, was really the first point that made me, it was a catalyst to realize, don't believe everything that's said to you, and the world doesn't operate in fairy tale-ish language or categories. So I think in a strange way, some of my work pushes back against that, if you will.
So as you said, storytelling is such a strong medium and it's developing, so I think in a very positive way, given that now we have so many, various platforms that we can use as storytelling formats. And I think I'm butchering this quote, and I don't even remember whose quote is it, but it's like, non-fiction is also a form of storytelling, and the fiction is not the only form. And I think our documentaries and short films and the work that you are doing is an example of that. So coming to Skyfall, from all this form of, as you initially mentioned, that you have realized that as a storyteller is something that you identify as, and then something that sort of encapsulates all sort of work that you are doing. So that transition from non-fiction to fiction, how did that, the idea that this is the medium you also want to explore came about? Because Skyfall's main theme, and I'm not giving anything away,
Sure.
also is sort of dealing with a couple of key social issues.
Yes.
So how did that transition came about? Was it easy? So just share a bit on that.
Yeah. So, and I don't think you're butchering it at all. I really read it in a similar way as well. When I've been thinking about nonfiction also just as part of storytelling, and I definitely believe that, it falls under that ambit. Fatma, the truth is that when I think about, I'm kind of now moving to fiction, I suppose. But when I think about storytelling in any form, I think the most immediate and visceral image that sparks in my mind is of, just a Purane Zamane mein, there was like, you'd be sitting around a campfire, just huddled, and like there were these, those old fashioned musings. And I think for me, the beauty of especially fiction, but also nonfiction, is that it allows you to bond with other human beings. And I think I personally am someone who really craves that human connect. All of last year has shown me that. And maybe I'll talk to you a little bit later about, the pandemic at some point. We can come to that. But I think I really do crave that. Coming to fiction, I wrote my first novella under the supervision of my professor, Dr. Ali Khan at LUMS. It was part of a senior year project. At the time, I thought, oh gosh, like I want to do this, like I want to write a novella. And he was kind enough to really champion it, and I ended up writing that. So I think that was my first stab at any kind of serious prospect of reckoning with fiction. Now obviously when I look back at it, I cringe and I'm like, how did he see me through this? But that's part of anything creative you put together. What's happened is, Fatma, over the last few years, I was focusing a lot on nonfiction. I was writing for, The Guardian and The Independent and a bunch of publications about, exactly like you said, a bunch of issues which really made me seethe, and I'm sure they bothered other people as well. However, whilst I was doing that, this was, I think, the winter of 2017, when my older daughter was a year old and my younger one was 2.5 weeks old. So, I've got two very small daughters. And it was at that point that I was sitting in a class at NYU, and a guest lecturer who was the headmaster at a school in England, he came and said something that really stopped me in my tracks. And he said, again, I'm probably butchering this quote now. He was quoting someone else, but he said something along the lines of, most men and women lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. And he asked everyone in the class, he said, what's your song? Take 5 minutes and scribble your song on a piece of paper. And without exaggeration, Fatma, I think that was the morning that, the seeds of Skyfall were kind of sown, And even though it sounded ludicrous having two very small children, getting back to work really quickly, but I think that's how my move to fiction happened. I guess I should also say, talking a little bit about the process of Skyfall, as you were asking me, I think it sparked within me a really important realization. And I think it's a realization that I'm going to carry with me through other creative endeavors. And that was that, when you think about writing a novel, when I think about writing 300 pages, it's not like speedily doing out, like churning an op-ed or a quick piece of flash fiction. It requires, it's a different beast. The kind of blood, sweat, and tears that go into that requires a whole different level of commitment, as so many people know. And I think the realization that I had, Fatma, was that आपको सबसे ज़्यादा खुशी होती है at the point when the idea is sown. So, at the germination stage, when I heard that headmaster say that, and I was like, oh, I want to write a book. I want to be a published author, I want to see my book on a bookshelf someday. That's exciting. And then the culmination is exciting. So today, to be having this talk with you, to be doing promotions, to have people say, oh, we stayed up all night reading Skyfall, obviously that's gratifying. But I think the biggest realization for me was that whilst those things are important, it is the middle process of staying the course. Those daily hours of sitting in NYU's library, inventing the world of Skyfall, literally using my imagination in this elastic way, stretching it as much as you can, making up these things, being on holiday in any part of the world and thinking, what are my characters doing right now? I should get back to writing. I think I realized that no matter how chaotic and messy that middle process is, kuch din honge aapko 6 loves milenge, or kuch din honge you'll get 6,000 words. But embracing all of that messiness eventually, I think, marks the difference between a book that reaches a bookshelf and I think one that, maybe doesn't get realized. And I think I really had to strip back this glorious prospect of, hey, I'm a published author, this is what I do, and clock in those hours. Mujhe ehsaas ye hua, which frankly I didn't have at the beginning. I'm not gonna pretend I did. The process of writing it made me realize there is no shortcut to those hours, and there is no shortcut to, putting that pen to paper. That's pretty non-negotiable. So I think that's what it's taught me, and hopefully that's something I take away with me as I move to other projects in the future.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, because even in the reading community, and someone like who loves to read, the new book, the idea that the author has written a new book, your favorite authors waiting for their books. It's pretty interesting with that, and we usually at times as readers forget, that it takes a lot of time. It might not be the quote unquote, वो जो हमने एक general devil बनाया हुआ है कि 9 to 5 jobs, boring
Yes.
jobs, but the writers, they are like 24/7 job जो है ना, that's also, it takes a toll. So speaking of characters, because you mentioned, even going on holidays, you were thinking what your characters were doing,
Yeah.
and I think this is my pet question for any author is,
Yeah.
पहले story आई थी, पहले characters आए थे?
Yeah. I mean, I think, Fatma, when I think back to this, now that I unravel the process, ab jab likh rahe hote, you don't, kind of think about it so consciously. I think what came first were the voices. And that is the voices of the protagonists, who are Rania and Usher. I'm not giving anything away either because that's obviously on the blurb. But I think the day I decided that I wanted to write Skyfall, when that process was, when those seeds were sown, I think their voices were really discernible and really visceral in my head. What do they sound like? What are they saying? What's their desperation? All of those things. And one of my early reviewers, Fatma, put it really well. I think he put it better than I could. He said something like, that voice, he said it's at once elegiac and growling. He said it's whispering and full-throated. And the part that really moved me was, he said, it sounds like an aria sung from a dark street corner. And I froze when I heard that, because it took me back to this world I had created in Lahore's gullies and streets, in Hira Mandi. And I think that shows me the centrality of voices in Skyfall, that it does sound like a song that is being sung from a dark street corner somewhere in Lahore. And so I knew that once I had the voices in my head, the plot and the characters would probably follow. Do I have to say, I think the other thing is that plot se pehle, what came was the sense of place. And I almost see geography and locations working as a character in the book, whether that's Lahore, whether that's Delhi, whether that's New York. And I think there's a reason for that, because the move from one geography to another is also marked by a symbolic shift. So it's marked by, there are different sections in the book, and it's marked by this move from nightfall to day to dawn. So I think the plot devices that I eventually used kind of got woven through the voice and the characters and the plays. I think that's something that came a little bit later.
So like, before we go ahead and sort of take a deep dive into the characters, one of the things that's basically written on the cover of the book is that at the end of the day, it's a story of hope. While you start, you have this grim idea, and I think most of our listeners have a basic idea of talking about the fact that we are talking about the red light area of Lahore,
Right.
the walled city, and uske apna it's sort of a subculture of its own. Any person who has read the non-fiction book Taboo by one of our Pakistan's leading sociologists जो हैं, उन्होंने उसको पूरा एक deep dive देख के, I have read that book, and since I started this, I could sort of थोड़ी सी वो जो ना the visuals जो हैं वो काफी, I could relate to it. So that was an interesting part. So the fact and this is sort of a general question for any sort of storytelling in it, from your perspective, and it applies to Skyfall as well. Given the social issues that you talk about and you work around, unme to find at the end of the day to see hope, because when you take a deep dive, as you do as an anthropologist, at times the situations, the dynamics are so murky and so depressing that you would like, why you at times start questioning humanity, you start questioning whatever and everything. So to just dig deep into it and then come out with a message of hope, how difficult it is in general, and in for fiction as well, because obviously even if it's fiction, the story needs to be relatable, and
Sure.
from what I have read so far, it is quite relatable. So how did you manage to take that path, and was it easy? What was the toll that went into it?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful question. Thank you for asking it. So, Fatma, I should start with saying that the title of the book, Skyfall, literally means the last attempt that you make against a group of people when you're outnumbered. And I think that sort of crystallizes the world of the book. I will not deny, exactly like you said, there are lots of dark places that Skyfall shoves readers into. It shoved me into it as I was writing it. But I think the primary source of Skyfall remains the movement from darkness to light. That's a metaphor that's referenced frequently throughout the book, and it's very close to my heart. And I guess I've set Skyfall in a way that there are these two people, Rania and Asher. It's following their lives, and I've set it in a world which feels it's fictional, but I feel it's quite dystopian and it's quite surreal. And that's because I didn't want to tell an inauthentic story. I did whilst hope is front and center, and you get there when you unearth all these other seedy, like you said, murky layers. I also didn't want to shy away from the darkness, and I didn't want to portray a picture that is sort of just from such a rose-colored lens. So I think I've set it in a world that I feel is dystopian, that I also feel is battling a really strange paradox. And that paradox is that it is pulling apart and tearing at the seams as quickly as it's coming closer. What I mean with that is that, there's so much talk of technology springing up, these global villages. You and I having this talk, in different parts of the world through this medium. Obviously, it's shrinking, borders are shrinking. But at the same time, I think what really bothers me is that, we are ferociously tearing apart as well. Like, I could be at an airport in Melbourne or at JFK and freaking out about my green passport, about being pulled into some interrogation room. That doesn't make me feel like the world is very intimate. So I think I struggled a lot with that, and I still do, with that kind of arbitrary man-made interference where the color of my passport is going to determine my prospects in life. So that's why I've set Skyfall in a world where I'm telling this complex coming-of-age story of Rania, who hails from the choked slums of Hira Mandi. Yet I wanted to say, I wanted her to journey from Lahore to New York to discard some of those stereotypes that we have about the third world and the first world. And so I read Skyfall as almost like a ballad, which is pushing back against issues that bother me, as I'm sure they bother a lot of other people. For instance, one of them is, and I think this is completely front and center in Skyfall, one of them is love jihad. It's 2020, and we'd imagine that, oh, this conspiracy theory about Hindus marrying Muslims sounds so primitive, it sounds so laughable. And yet we're seeing this crackdown on Hindu-Muslim marriages in India reach an astronomically dangerous point. We've seen it in the aftermath of the Tanishq ad. We've seen it with the scene from A Suitable Boy. And I have to say that when I see things like that, and they've made their way into Skyfall, I feel like what Skyfall's doing is, funnily, it feels like it's conducting some kind of a social autopsy. I think these issues always were there, but they were under the garb of political correctness. For a long time, we had this great human-to-human contact across both countries. And suddenly we're realizing that actually even blossoming friendships are now spilling over into really indiscriminate animosity. So I wanted Skyfall, coming to your point about hope, I wanted Skyfall to reignite the prospect of harmony and humanity between a place like India and a place like Pakistan. The other thing that it again takes you into a dark space with is female desire and the inner lives of women from South Asia, right? And a woman with desires in a country like Pakistan is akin to a troublemaker. She's looked upon as fast and just, she's an outlier. Yet we know, Fatma, that not having desires or living a desire agnostic life, that's anti-human. Like, everybody has desires, but we see it as going against the grain of being a good girl, a good woman, a good other. So I think with Skyfall, what I wanted to do was I wanted to spark a conversation around women from our part of the world, no matter how uncomfortable and nervous that makes people. But yet to say, if I can stop and have this conversation with you today, then that's some kind of a beginning.
Mm.
And एक और चीज है Fatma, which I really do want to bring up, and this part's very close to my heart. I think the final thing that Skyfall does, coming to your point again about light and hope, it tells you that your starting points, the household you're born in, the color of your skin, the gender that you're born into, those can be outdone. They're not cemented, or they're not sealed in this fixed, immutable manner. I think again that comes from a very personal vantage point, because having grown up in a middle class home in Karachi, your mind is kind of colonized to believe those dreams are not for you. Please be realistic, and you can't really think of achieving this, that, the other. I think what Skyfall does is it gives you back that control. It says, "Aapki aukaat aapko koi aur nahi bata sakta." You're the only one who should get to determine what your worth is. And Rania's journey is emblematic of that. She goes from these choked slums of Hira Mandi all the way to New York. Um, and I think her journey is daring readers with one possibility, and that dare is amplify your reality so that it fits your dreams rather than the other way around, rather than downsizing your dreams so that they fit your reality. So I think in ways maybe more subtle than apparent, hope is front and center once you've peeled back all that morbidity and darkness, which also I couldn't shy away from.
Yeah. So this was very interesting, and I think I have a question. You talked about the stereotypes, uh, both domestic and international. It's not just stereotyping between East and West. I think within every community, and I think all across the globe, with the current political climate we are seeing, every place has weird stereotypes. And as you mentioned, having that passport doesn't really feel like that we are part of this global village. And that, I think, has also started another debate about the dream that globalization and the global village gave to a lot of people around the world, and which is now shattering and sort of rethinking the
Sure.
dynamics. That's a whole different conversation. But before we dig more into the aspect of the East and West from the perspective of an audience, a readership, and what are the expectations, uh, what's the role of poetry in your personal life? Because Skyfall uses poetry uh, right at the start. Obviously, the main character, who is an aspiring singer, but the way you have used poetry, from whatever I've read so far, the couplets that you have used, they are pretty hardcore. They're not just somebody just researching for the book and just putting them in to make sense. So just talk about poetry and how has, because our region in general is known for, has a very strong poetic heritage. So what was that for you personally, and how did that sort of transpire into Skyfall?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think I've grown up in a house where my father was a professor of English literature, but funnily, he would say that the sign of being properly educated is to be able to converse in Urdu as well as you converse in English. So I think, the language, I should say, because I feel even though so much of our instruction happens in English and has happened in English, there is from a young age, I was exposed to a lot of Urdu literature. So be that in the form of prose or poetry within our home. So it kind of characterized a lot of dining table conversations and things like that. And obviously a lot of those times, when Abu was quoting, exactly like you're saying, pretty hardcore poetry, it was incomprehensible to us as kids, and he would try and break that down. But I think so I've been socialized with that. The other thing, Fatma, is that I took a very keen interest in Urdu literature at university as well. So, with exposure to not just fairs and ghalib and that sort of thing, but also Urdu prose really spoke to me. And I feel like there's a musicality to Urdu prose, even if it's not poetry. And so short stories, by Ismat Chughtai and Manto, and those sorts of individuals, I think I started gaining exposure to them, and they spoke to me me in a way that I have to admit English literature didn't, which I know sounds funny because the language today that comes to me immediately, quite unfortunately, is English more than Urdu.
Mhm.
But so I think kahin wo, that kind of calcified, and I felt like, I suppose the other thing is that I see Urdu poetry, even though as a language it may be fading, I feel that the power of music and poetry is so universal. I can put on Fez's poetry in front of a bunch of people who know nothing about Pakistan or the language or the subcontinent, and yet I would find it difficult to believe that they wouldn't find it powerful. So in that sense, I think because universality, the language of humanism, coexistence lies at the heart of Skyfall, I feel poetry it offered me a way to kind of break down some of those barriers in a world that's becoming, so polarized. The other thing that I should mention, who really had a big impact on me, was I spent a lot of afternoons in Karachi with Tina Sani, who obviously, was a big influence. And I remember that marked a big entry for me into the world of Ghalib, which frankly is quite difficult to, I found it quite difficult to understand. But there was just such a compelling way in which, she spoke to me about Faiz and Ghalib over cups of tea. And I feel like those conversations have really made their way into Skyfall. And yeah, so I think that's where the poetry maybe emerges from. It allows me to talk about a language that is more universal, as opposed to saying, is it Western, is it Eastern? It's agnostic to a lot of these human constructions of color and caste and religion and creed.
Yeah, so that's very interesting because the way you said that those influences of poetry and some of the local authors that you name. Uh, I would actually want to ask this before we move on because Manto and Ismat Chugtai, these are the names that are unfortunately, I don't know, for the lack of a proper word, demonized in our educational system.
Yeah.
Uh, and until and unless it's a personal influence in your home and in your personal circle, our educational institutions are not very much interested in telling students, that this is something that they need to explore. These are the things that they can
Yeah.
read and get those stories out of it. So that's a very interesting thing because हमारे यहाँ वही वाली ऐसी बात है. Even fact that, as you mentioned, that English is something that that's what comes to your mind when it comes to writing. Those
Yeah.
influences, I think, stick with you, and
Absolutely.
they translate. Um,
Yes. I think,
so
Fatma, it could be the simplest story in Urdu. मेरे
yeah,
दिमाग में अभी आ रही है. I think Mumtaz Mufti wrote this short, beautiful, really poignant short story called Apa. I think I read it a long time ago. I was maybe 17 or 18. And I'll tell you, Fatma, that story has not left me. I mean, the premise, it's not like with Ismat Chuftai or Mumtaz Mufti or Manto, it's not necessarily like it was earth shattering, or the story was completely groundbreaking. But I don't know. I feel like they were brave and they were courageous and they wrote in a language that felt so poetic. And all I can say is that I'm glad I had that exposure because ab mujhe hota hai that I hope there's a way my girls living in the UAE can learn Urdu. So yeah.
yeah, I think you will be able to do that fairly well
Yeah.
because kids growing in Pakistan are not very, unfortunately, not very fluent in language either. And
Yeah.
I have to repeat that whenever I say this, I mean, our socioeconomic circle. I don't mean
Sure.
everybody in Pakistan.
Sure, sure,
Um,
sure.
and what you said about, the story of being simple but being able to leave an impact, as Musharraf Ali Faruqi says, story का काम सबसे पहले entertain करना है, सबक देना नहीं है. So that sticks. So obviously, I think we'll have another conversation focused on the issues of literature
Yes.
in Pakistan because that's sort of becoming my pet peeve as well. Moving on to Skyfall and what the East and West, uh, the comparison that you also mentioned, and we were talking about stereotypes. Um, Whenever a South Asian writer is writing in English, there's unfortunately um, I don't know, a stereotype or an expectation, both at the Western and the Eastern level, it's for a specific audience. That
Right.
the story will have these specific, and I think this is this is an expectation of the Western reader. And I'm just talking about from whatever we have seen in reviews written in English publications at XYZ. And this also becomes, I think, one of the key criticism when from locals
Yeah.
of these authors writing in English कि जी ये तो गोरों के लिए लिख रहे हैं ना, मतलब सिर्फ ऐसे ही ना थोड़ी ना होता है, और भी बड़ा
Yeah.
कुछ होता है XYZ.
Yeah.
But these specific, why are people writing just about these XYZ specific topics?
Yeah.
So my first question is did you come across something similar so far, and not just with Skyfall, but also with, because you have been involved in filmmaking as well, and obviously the sort of films you have been making are
Yeah.
talking about these specific topics. And secondly, when you were writing, and because you have an international publisher, were there
Yeah.
any expectations from the fact that because a South Asian or a Pakistani person is writing a
Hmm.
story about such a specific topic,
Hmm.
A, B, C, and D, these are the elements that need to be there?
Yeah. So I should maybe start with the second question, Fatma, because that'll be a quicker response. So the short answer is no, nothing at all. So Bloomsbury was, I mean, they got the book. When they got the book, my agent got it first. Obviously, he pitched it, and it's funny because I don't really belong to that typical, conventional inner circle of publishing and writing. I don't really have. I'd never had access, and I just looked up, possibilities. Then one night, I pitched to an agent, and I never went mass pitching because I looked up, a couple of agents, and I was like, let me send my work to someone who, I just want to research the agent first to say, all right, what are they look in the sense that will my work speak to them? I didn't want to just mass pitch. So point kind of being, I wrote to him one evening with the pitch and with 3 chapters, and he wrote back in under 10 minutes and said, send me the manuscript. And, obviously we've had rounds of editing and things, but to answer the second question, there were no major storyline or any structural edits to the book right from its first draft. And they never told me, fix this character or write it in a particular way or play to this trope. Now, coming to the second point, this ties in, this allies with what you brought up earlier, Fatma, which is the conversation about light and hope. And I think maybe because I've consumed literature from our part of the world that tends to succumb to these issues, shayad ek consciousness thi, shayad ek reluctance tha to say, again, what I said to you earlier, these problems exist. They can't be downsized if you want to tell a sincere story. Yet, that's not the full story. And I think I struggle where people stop their pen at the point where it's like, oh, this is Pakistan, it's on the boil, it's falling apart, and it's completely failed, and come save us. So I think what was important for me was that with Skyfall, I've not claimed any representation that I'm speaking for Pakistani women. This is what Pakistan's like. But I will say that I think what I've tried to do is I've tried to strip open this caricature, this mold in which we try and box Pakistan. And it's to say, yes, of course, Pakistan is chaotic. Of course, it's messy. But then isn't that how most real places and most people are? And I think, Rania's journey, like I've got the book here, and even with, the cover, Fatma, which it has been shot like you see the protagonist and you see these archways. This is in front of the Sheesh Mahal. And I wanted to make it a point that we do this photo shoot in Lahore because the idea of the cover is that this protagonist from Hira Mandi is looking out to the glittering, liberal, so-called savior of the world kind of West. And I think I wanted to shatter that stereotype of the American dream, whether now it plays to a Western gallery or not, and whether people in the West get uncomfortable with it. I think I've worked agnostic to that because this is the story I wanted to tell. I wanted to open up a window into the West from the eyes of people who've been browned out, like this brown girl from the West, and how the immigration apocalypse really shatters her illusions about this place that she grew up in Hira Mandi thinking represents everything superior, that,
Yeah.
excuse my saying this, but that made her always believe that her homeland needed saving and was inferior. So I think the point being that I have shown the realities of a place like Hira Mandi. I've shown the reality of religious hypocrisy. I've not shied away from those things. Yet at the end, I think Rania's journey symbolizes that, she wants to reclaim her homeland. And it makes us realize that things can be broken yet beautiful. And I think it sparks a conversation about embracing vulnerability, about embracing imperfection, and saying, again, presenting Pakistan as an equal in literature. I feel that doesn't happen often enough. It's something I've really struggled with. So I think placing Skyfall across these different backdrops of Lahore and Delhi and New York, it allowed me to present Pakistan as an equal, and that aligns really nicely with rejecting a lot of these tropes and not succumbing to. So yes, let's talk about the problems. Of course they are, but they're not specific to Pakistan. And I think that's why people ask me, how come New York is part of the story? Is it personal to you? And I'm like, it's not personal to me in that I've grown up in New York, but it's personal to me in that I grew up believing and internalizing the stereotype that this society is superior to mine. And that's exactly what the protagonist does as well. And so I needed to open up a window into this, glittering world of the West to debunk some of those myths.
Yeah, and I think it's quite timely given the past couple of years what we've seen.
Yes.
And I think the what we were discussing earlier as well, this idea, this hope that globalization gave. One aspect of it was, one part of the society, one part of the world has achieved everything, and they are the goal, and the rest of the world needs to develop into that. And now we
Yes.
are realizing that no state or no nation, quote unquote, can claim a moral superiority, and everybody is struggling.
Absolutely.
And I think I think we should stay there. We should just keep on struggling at individual level, and to get
Absolutely.
some level of humanity.
Yeah.
So let's dig into social media questions.
Yeah.
I had a couple of more, but I'm going to take a break on it because otherwise we won't be able to cover those, and we got some pretty
Yeah.
interesting questions.
Yeah, sure.
So someone, Katie from New York, has asked that if there's one book you wish you had written, which one would it be? And I think this is also one of those questions that every author gets asked. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That I'd written. Yeah, I think that's a tricky one, right? Because it's a double-edged sword. You look at it and you're like, oh gosh, I wish I could write like that. But
Yeah.
then you also feel like that author's done such a fantastic job with it that um, Fatma, I think it would be Mott Smoke by Mohsin Hamid, and I'll tell you
Yeah.
why. Not just, I loved the book, but I think I say this, I choose Mott Smoke not just for Mohsin Hamid's, kind of stylistic
Mhm.
sophistication, and not just for his thematic prowess. वो सब चीजें तो हैं. We of course know that he's, like the king of his craft. But I don't know, for me, when I read Mott Smoke, it held a kind of symbolic value in that it felt like a breakout book. And
Yeah.
the reason I say that is that it marked a paradigm shift in reclaiming voices from the global south, especially from Pakistan. I think in that way, it opened up a window for Pakistani writers, which had remained shut for very long. And it gave our storytelling this recognition on a global map, to say our story doesn't necessarily have to be playing to those tropes and those stereotypes, and yet it can be really compelling and really powerful. And people had to they stood up and they took notice of writers of Pakistani origin. So I think I think Mott Smoke has been really trailblazing. I think it's emblematic of a lot more than just a gripping kind of powerful story. And I think I would have loved to spearhead a watershed moment like that. Like, what a great legacy to leave.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I should add the disclaimer to say I think he's done such a fantastic job with it. I'm a huge admirer of his work, and so it's just as well he wrote it.
Yeah, yeah, Lahore getting represented in English fiction the way Lahore was actually, and not some from an from an external lens was pretty entertaining and pretty refreshing, I would say.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
so there are two questions that I'm going to combine together. So Hind from Turkey has asked that one book you want to read before you die. So again, one of those regular questions, but I would like to add to it another. I think this is an anonymous question. I know. So this other question is, what are the general genres that you read as
Mm.
as a reader? What are your preferred reading genres or and frequent authors that you go back to?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, in terms of the book, I want to read one book before I die. Maybe this is not a conventional answer, Fatma, but anyway, I'm not sure we're looking for conventional answers here, but I would probably say the Quran. And I'll tell you why I
Mhm.
say that, because it's obviously something that I've read a few times, at different stages in my life. Yet I can't sit here and pretend that I've profoundly processed it or interpreted it as deeply as I would like to in at some point in my life. And I think the reason for that is that, of course, we know that it offers a kind of a code of conduct of life and so much more than just religious scripture. But coming back to your earlier point, especially at a time when we're in this current climate of polarization, I feel it would also help to, it would give me the tools to, when I talk to someone about Islam or I talk to someone about faith, it'll give me the tools to debunk some of those easily drawn up caricatures of, Islam and about guns and bombs and the bearded terrorists that are floating, especially in the West. And I feel it would be a very clinching ode to humanity, which I'm very much about, as you've seen from Skyfall. And the beauty of it is, like, irrespective of the faith that you follow, I think anybody reading scripture like that, I think it can allow us to imagine a better way of living, a more humane way
Yeah,
of living.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the first part. And then coming to genres, I think what I enjoy most is literary fiction. And that's not to say I don't read other genres, but I think what I'm trying to say is that, again, where you started your description of Skyfall, which is so apt, that's exactly how I see it. It's kind of this mixture of fact and fiction, fact and fantasy. And it's interesting how fiction can sometimes seem truer than
Then
than the reality.
reality, true.
Yeah, the reality, right? And so I think for me, works like To Kill a Mockingbird have been really, really powerful. They've stayed with me. And I think the reason why I say that is also because, again, in a moment like this where we see so much of the world being ripped apart, etc., but we also see so much of everything being breaking news and being sensational, and there's always this imminent threat. There's a climate change, there's a disease, there's a bomb somewhere. I think what literary fiction offers is it allows you to break through that scrolling syndrome कि आप जल्दी जल्दी अपने news feed पे या prime time television blaring, which I've kind of stopped listening to now.
Yeah,
I think the format of a literary fiction novel allows you to really break through that, and yet it allows you to deliver a cavalcade of really piercing truth about these pressing issues. But it doesn't do it in a way that's preachy. It doesn't do it in a way that talks at readers or peddles an agenda. So I think to me that feels like a very important genre right now, and it's what I'm I think drawn to in quite a compelling way.
yeah, yeah. That's pretty interesting answer. And as I think you talked about Quran, and I was like, a scripture that sort of tells you how to. I think if you, from whatever I have read and understood, the idea of life, or how not just individual life but the community life, and sort
Yeah.
of the community life that sort of is sort of we are seeing every community being in stretches and being sort of killing itself and not understanding what's going on. I think that's a very interesting point. To I think it's also sort of it's on us as well to read and understand and represent that, instead of saying we have a book, you can read it. It's
Yeah.
not what you see in the on these, like, yeah, you have to show it. You can't just always tell everybody to read it. So
That's
so yeah,
exactly it. And I feel a bit
yeah,
insincere, kind of,
yeah.
pushing back against stereotypical tropes and conversations, and yet not having fully processed, such a vital scripture itself. And even when I think my closest exposure to it has been a book by Reza Islan, which is No
Yeah.
God But God. And Fatma, I think that was the first time that it. I know there are other sort of criticisms that the book gets, and I'm not here to praise it, but I think what it did for me was it opened up the closest window into that society of Medina that gets talked about so much. And exactly like you're saying, that communal living and what were the principles upon which it was set. And, I was reading it with a class at NYU just last year. And I think that's when I realized, oh my God, like I quote this Society of Medina as if I've immersed myself in it. And I didn't have the first idea of what it actually encapsulated. So, yeah.
Yeah. Moving on, and yes, as you hinted on earlier as well, we have a question that's connected to the pandemic. How did the pandemic help or hinder your journey with Skyfall? This question is from Daily, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this her name correctly. It's, I think, Kailash. Yeah.
Right.
So hopefully I pronounced it right. But that's a question, and I'll just add to it, and for generally for your work, because as we introduced you as a teacher as well, just everything sort of shifted 180 degrees, and we had to and it was not just the things were shifting. The world has seen pandemics before, and as scientists are predicting, this is not the last one we will be seeing in our lifetime. So may God
Yeah.
help us. But
Yeah.
we had, it was expected that this is something that's happening, but what I felt was that instead of just sitting down and processing that the world is going through a global pandemic, it was expected that our productivity level stays at the same level. So adapt, because we have technology. So if you're teaching, start teaching online instantly. And I think that has also added to that mental health stress that everybody is facing, and even mental health experts are saying, some specifically in the US, obviously for a couple of other reasons as well, that the mental health pandemic is the next global pandemic. That's, once we are done with this, that's what we are facing. So just share how, as the question says, how did that impact Skyfall, and also maybe talk about how were you able to manage all the other aspects of your work and then dealing with the pandemic, specifically with small kids. How did
Yeah.
all fall,
Yeah.
or how did the pieces of the puzzle set in?
Yeah, well, Fatma and Kailash, thank you for that, because I feel like any opportunity to just vent about what a harrowing year it's been is I think it's the first step to feeling better. I mean, I have to be honest, Fatma, I can't sugarcoat it, and I can't pretend with you that it's been an idyllic setting. It hasn't been at all. Um, Not for launching a debut novel, but even for it's not been ideal for so many other things. Now, I know I sound like this is a first world problem because there are people with much more fundamental issues. Yet I feel like, when I talk to my sister, I often say, I don't think we should downsize our problems either, because this problem is quite real to me. That's not detracting from anybody else's more fundamental issues. I think what hit me the most was that, and I've written about this for nonfiction, like sort of op-ed pieces, but I feel like a lot of people started realizing pretty quickly in that it's a patriarchal pandemic in many ways. And the burden on working mothers like myself and so many, well, on women in general, but I think
Yeah.
specifically on working mothers, it started out tough, Fatma, but I feel like we're still at homeschooling in the UAE now, and I feel like that burden today is on absolute steroids. Like there is no denying that, and um, I can't mince my words about that. So, like I still have two daughters who are very tiny. They're 3 and 4. I mean, what is 3 and 4? And we've been oscillating between homeschooling and cooking, and then editing Skyfall, and exactly like you said, suddenly adapting to these Zoom classes. And I mean, when last summer ended, I think I had so much Zoom fatigue. So forget about right now. And it's been, we kept, like Bloomsbury and I kept thinking about how much forward do we push this timeline. And I'm kind of, whilst I was very nervous to launch in the middle of this pandemic, I'm glad we bit that bullet and did it, because I don't think we're resuming to any kind of old normal anytime soon. So you kind of, and wohi cheez hoti hai that necessity becomes the mother of invention, and you kind of come up with ways of, kind of working around it. So there's that. But there is a foil to it as well. Like, I don't think it's all been bad news. And I'll tell you what I mean with that. That this world of Skyfall during lockdown, and I had done a lot of that writing already by that point. We were in the editing stage, obviously, right? Because this thing has been going on for the past several years. And I have a really vivid and visceral impression of the people and the places, Lahore ki galiyan, New York, because I've been there. Delhi, I haven't, but still, from anecdotal conversations, research. And I think what that did was that by the time the pandemic hit us, I was so immersed in this world that in a really strange and fantastical way, I think it became a kind of a getaway. It became this easy emergency exit that I could helicopter myself out of. And without any exaggeration, I think there were these distinct moments during lockdown evenings where I had to snap myself out. Like, mein kabhi gaadi mein we would, because the only thing you could do was go for a drive when there was complete lockdown. And, we'd be driving and I'd just be thinking about Rania and Usher. And I know this sounds silly because, of course, they're just in my head. But yet I think the process of writing is so immersive, and lockdown gave me that opportunity that instead of just obsessing on the pandemic, which, don't get me wrong, I definitely did, it allowed me an alternative world for a while. And call it an escape, call it fantastical, yet I feel like I think it offered a strange kind of solace. And so it was frustrating, but then it was also rewarding in equal measure to have done this during the pandemic. I also feel like if you have your debut out in the middle of the pandemic, then hopefully you're moving up rock bottom after that. And, I don't know, I can't say like you're saying, but, I do want to come to your point about productivity and mental health, because I do feel there were a lot of moments when I felt that pressure, either inflicting it upon myself, either from someone external. And it was really harrowing. I think it was really harrowing, to be stuffing my daughter's mouths with food and thinking, oh gosh, like, I've got to finish this. And I know this is not just my story. I don't want to be narcissistic and make it about myself. But I think a point came a few months into it where I really consciously, I think talking to my siblings and my mother really helped about this, just to bounce off and say, take stock. Like, you can't keep going at this pace. And things are not normal. So if you achieve even 1/10 of what you set out to achieve, or don't achieve it, it's all right. And it's not a time to be really harsh on yourself. And I think I should say this, Fatma, that there was a very conscious time a few months ahead of Skyfall, like maybe 2-3 months before, where I was scared of opening up social media, because I think it's one of the mediums that, of course, I use it and it's so powerful. I mean, I've used it to my advantage with this community of authors and people who've blurbed my book who I never knew before. So wo cheezein hain. But so I'm not trying to completely demonize it, but I think there is a pressure that gets put on you, either again by yourself looking at other people, or other people portraying a certain kind of perfection, which I just had to stop chasing. And I just had to say, this is not my reality. And, and again, like, the mental health fallout of that, my sister said something really interesting to me a couple of weeks ago. And she said, I think social media is going to be to our mental health a few years on what cigarettes are to our physical health. And again, I don't think we can box the whole thing in one, thing and say, oh, all of it is bad. No, I think there's an upside, but we have to think about it with caution. And I think because technology ka itna interaction and the usage went up so much, that in a way that expectation of productivity was like, oh, of course you're going to be able to churn out a novel. And so, yeah, you've got 2 small daughters, but just get with the program. And I think it took me a lot to stop and say, I'm going to completely collapse. Like, I'm going to have a complete breakdown. And I had several breakdowns. I can't pretend I didn't. Hopefully we've seen it across the finish line. And, but it's been a very difficult year for so many people. And I think one can just also be grateful for a lot of things.
Yeah, I agree with what you talk about social media, and obviously technology is not going to take a reverse gear; it's going to go forward. But my take on that, and as you said, you know, while it has a lot of issues, social media has a lot of issues, but obviously there are pluses that people use as well. But
Yes.
not to demonize the medium, but the fact the way it's used. Because if we sort of churn out every time there's been a tech advancement, every time there have been a group of people who, for some odd reason, have found a negative use of it and then have been able to amplify
Yes.
that sort of side of it and sort of taken down all the positives of it. So yeah, that's something that we really need to be cautious of, given the plethora of issues that it's creating, specifically for the next generation. Because
Yes.
maybe our generation was sort of in a transitionary phase, so even though we can't resist it, but we at times get to sort of check ourselves. But I think
Yes.
it's important that we be very careful with the younger generation.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question. This is more on the sort of a generic side, as talking about your craft. And the question is, how did you develop your craft as a storyteller? Your biggest influences, and how has the filmmaking and academic research influenced your fiction? This is Usman Hanif from UK.
Yeah. Thanks for that question, Usman. I don't hail from a conventional fiction writing background. So again, it goes back to that headmaster's quote that I just felt it was a song that I was dying to sing, or dying to unearth rather. To answer the question about how I've developed my craft, I think I think travel for me has been a very important source of writing or storytelling, I should say. And when I say travel, I don't think I necessarily mean getting onto a plane or a train or any vehicle for that matter. Of course, wo cheezein hain. When I've visited new places, it opens up so many windows and all of that. But I think what I'm referring to is any kind of experience that you gain that can transport you into another world that maybe you didn't have access to before. Now this could be this conversation I'm having with you right now, or the ones I had with Tina Sani. I think it could be a visit to for example, my days in Lahore, and I think that's why the novel is based in Lahore, because I've spent a lot of time there during my undergraduate years, and really seen the parts of Lahore that are not sanitized, that I mean, kind of visited Hira Mandi, really been in those streets and alleys. And so I see that as travel. I see that as an experience. I don't know, just a street play you'd watch. I think for me, that would transport me into something else, a ghazal, whatever it might be. So I think that allows me to, again, going back to my anthropological background, that people watching idea कि आप कहीं ना कहीं mental note ले रहे होते हो to say, oh, that's interesting. Like whether it's a dialogue, whether it's something that's unfolding as a story in front of your eyes. And I think whether you put it down on paper at that point or not, somewhere the residuals calcify in your mind, and in your brain. So that's one part that's helped me kind of story tell and hone the craft. As far as Usman's question on filmmaking and academia goes, I feel like it's the original thing I said, Fatma, that I think storytelling can operate agnostic to the medium. I think that's how I see it. And not just agnostic, but I think all these mediums are also conversant with each other. You could sit around a campfire and sing a song, you could recite poetry, you could tell a short story, I could tell you a phone call from my mother about that, whatever. So it's this idea of co-creating, which, it doesn't matter what medium you use. However, I think that the experience with research, so whether that's now looking at hip hop and rap and Liari, whether it is looking at, kind of the jihadist propaganda with Afghani men, or whether it's, the filming I did in Liari and other parts of Karachi for the Street Child football film I made, I think I didn't know it at the time. उस वक्त जब मैं लियारी में वो filming कर रही थी, I'm sure I didn't think, oh, somewhere this is going to really impact Skyfall. Yet I feel that, those anecdotes, that experience of visiting those places have somehow influenced my fiction writing, and they've made their way into it. More practically speaking, I think writing and rewriting is something that I've realized much more afterwards, that it just, there's no other way. It goes back to that middle process I was telling you about. And when I look at Skyfall today, of course, the spirit in the world I set out to create is the same as the first draft, but so much of the sentence structure and the language is different, because I've written and rewritten it. And I guess that's why it takes so much time, because each sentence is being very closely scrutinized. So I think I invested a lot of time in trying to find my voice. And that voice was after consuming material that other people who I admire write, unki cheezein padh ke, but also coming to understand my positionality and what vantage point am I writing from. I'm of South Asian origin. I'm based out of the Middle East, which itself is a very interesting geographical location. It feels like an experiment, like a laboratory. And, I'm a woman of color. So I think when I reckoned with my own positionality, it allowed me to find my voice, which, again, it goes back to what you said about poetry. There were moments where I was thinking, my writing sounding quite lyrical. That's something what the reviewers have said as well. But I was thinking of it in a second guessing kind of freaked out way. That is the sound, and I guess that's normal. But I eventually realized that I think fiction is kind of poetry in motion, and there is a musicality to it, and it's okay to remain distinctive with your voice. And I think I stopped trying to clamp down on what that distinctive style was, and that helped me hone the craft.
Yeah, I mean, it's general saying, I think, that good and great writers are the ones who can are comfortable with rewriting, because rewriting and editing, self-editing, is something that's even with fiction and non-fiction, I think it's not very a comfort spot. Moving on to the next question. This is from Dr. Gohar Khan from Oxford, UK, and he is asking that, as a writer, what is the best thing you can do to elevate the suffering in this increasingly sterile world? What does your novel offer humanity? That's a very hard-hitting question.
Yeah, that makes it sound like you need to do
Yeah,
something consequential, which I think you do.
exactly.
Yeah, well, I think I've said this before, but this lies at the heart of Skyfall, and that is I think I was hoping, without an agenda, but I have to admit that I think I was hoping to write a book that offers us that allows us to imagine a better way of living. Again, without downsizing the issues, but it makes that movement from darkness to light possible. Because I feel like the minute you lose that light, wherever it might be emanating, or wo jitni bhi dim aapko lage, but I think that source of light has to remain on for me. So I think in terms of, placing it in a dystopian world and yet keeping hope front and center, I was wanting to offer a world which has, in some ways, you might say it's idealistic, but I think it's a world I was hoping which is post-apocalyptic. It's post-love jihad, it's post-immigration issues, all of that. And just to say it's a world where coexistence is the currency, where we can be peaceful, we can celebrate our differences instead of kind of being at each other's throats about them. And I hope that offers something uplifting, because I think Skyfall is trying to offer humanity the realization that it is so dangerous to paint everyone with the same brush. And yet we see it happening everywhere, every single day. This claim that terrorism has a religion, that, even though all Muslims might not be terrorists, people will tell you all terrorists are Muslims. That's the stereotype you see, right? And I think I am desperate to say that's false. It's not okay to, get people to believe these as immutable truths, and yet people do, and people are brainwashed to believing that. So I think what I'm trying to offer humanity, to answer the question, is that to show that things like terrorism and violence, they don't have a face, they don't have a religion, they don't have a nationality. And I feel like even if Skyfall so much as sparks a conversation around this, or gets one person to start thinking about peaceful coexistence as a possibility, I think it'll feel revolutionary, and I feel like it'll be a starting step to interrupt this current climate of polarization. So I think that's what I can offer.
Yeah, and I think your anthropology background comes into it because, as you said, the terms we people are brainwashed into thinking XYZ because obviously, when an act of terrorism takes place, if the culprits are Muslim, it's terrorism. But if it's not a Muslim, it's a crazy individual going cuckoo out of his mind. But yeah,
Yes, yes.
so that was the last social media question. And just to wrap up this conversation, we didn't really go into an in-depth book detail because I think this is one of your initial book talks that you have done. So I want people to actually read it, and maybe we can have a follow-up session where we can actually, spoil it for people as well. I mean, we'll just say spoiler alerts. But to wrap up, we did your research. You have a background in research. So my last question would be, when you were writing this, and as you also previously mentioned, you don't necessarily always need to have that light bulb moment that gives you the greatest idea of your life. These are small incidents that you can develop into something. So the research that went for Skyfall, because even though it's fiction, and as we mentioned earlier, they do cater to real issues that we face in our communities, in our society in general. So, did you do any specific research for the book, or your previous work sort of fed into uh, Skyfall?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of different things that amassed over time. I think one of the key researches that I didn't know at the time I was doing for the book was several years ago was based on this particular part of Lahore. And just trying to understand and uncover some of the nuances, not looking at it in a typical kind of red light area, lens. So there was that research that I definitely drew upon, and I think that lies really front and center. The other thing, which is not really research, but with the amplifying of nonfiction writing that I've done in these last several years, which obviously deal with a lot of these issues that come up in the book. I think that for me, uske liye, obviously, I had done basic research. I didn't have to necessarily always go out and do something, but I think that the seeds of that are definitely, really vehemently a part of Skyfall's journey. But my anthropological research on revolutions and social movements and, stuff like the Me Too. So again, this goes back to where we started the conversation to say it's easy to look at work that's got traction in the US and say, oh, people are now there are really positive verdicts that have come out. But I've done a lot of research on Me Too, based on interviews with sexual harassment survivors. Now, obviously, their particular stories have not made their way into Skyfall. They're going to make their way into things like the mini series, etc. But it would be hard to deny that somewhere listening to those anecdotes, listening to those stories have not influenced the way I've thought about female, inner lives of women, female desires, and things like that. The rest of it, I suppose, is also so much of this surround sound that we have when it comes to stuff like love jihad and, thinking of a way of like, how do I talk about these issues without being didactic, but also again without how do I break through people's news clutter? And I think it's been heartening because I think I had this fear that kitabein ab kaun padhta hai, and yet I think with Skyfall being like just a month old, I've realized that no, I think people crave stories that speak to them and that are from our part of the world and that are not necessarily succumbing to those stereotypes. So I think, then again, the work that I'm doing on religious propaganda, of course, that just, the point is, Fatma, that I don't think I wanted to do this as a research project, but I also didn't want to write an irresponsible, in an ill-informed piece, given that literary fiction will inevitably, the fabric of it is woven with fact and fiction. So somehow you don't want to misappropriate, you don't want to be insincere and inauthentic, so I think that does require some degree of opening up an actual window into whether it's Hira Mandi, whether it's the immigration apocalypse, whether it's madrasas and religion. So I have to say that I think my anthropological background was really pivotal in harnessing some of that storytelling.
Thank you for your time. This was really interesting. And as I said, we will give Skyfall a bit of time, and then maybe we'll have you back. I think, I don't know if you have a book tour schedule with everything that's going around. I think most of it is going to be virtual. But once Skyfall, some people have actually read it, we can actually have another conversation and go deep dive into characters and the story plots. Thank you so
I
much
would
for your
love
time.
that.
And best of luck, and we will hopefully be looking out for your other storytelling projects as well.
Thank you so much, Fatma. Thank you for this really, really enjoyable and, very gratifying conversation. And I'm excited for you to keep going with Skyfall. And yes, would love to chat about it at a later stage.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.